Thank you for joining us this evening for our Great Expectations panel. How do we recalibrate when life goes off script? The authors of these 3 entertaining new memoirs each tackle their unique situations with honesty, courage, and heartfelt humor. I'd like to start by introducing tonight's presenters, Rachel Matlow, Michelle Parise, and Alison Waring. Rachel Matlow was a longtime producer on the Arts and Culture program, Q on CBC Radio, where they also worked on Spark and the Sunday edition. Their audio documentary, Dead Mom Talking, won a 2016 Third Coast Award and a 2017 Gabriel Award. They have written for the Globe and Mail, National Post, and The Believer. Rachel plays chess every weekend and is forever planning their next long-distance hike. Michelle Parise is an award-winning journalist, writer, and performer. She has worked for the CBC for more than 2 decades in everything from children's television to music programming and documentary making, as well as at the helm of many national radio programs. She's also a soccer player, parent, and champion campfire builder. The daughter of Italian immigrants, she was born and raised in Toronto, where she still lives today. Alison Waring is the best-selling author of Confessions of a Fairy's Daughter, an Indigo Top 50 pick shortlisted for the Edna Stabler Prize and longlisted for the RBC Taylor Prize, and Honeymoon in Purdah, an Iranian Journey. She teaches, performs solo multimedia plays, and leads writing workshops internationally.
Okay. So this book is the story of my life turning upside down overnight and me dealing with the sudden grief of a life lost and isolation and feeling loneliness and lonely. 2 things I learned are very different things. So you don't need to know the story to know the ins and outs for this. This is just a part of the book called I Should Sleep, But I Don't Sleep. I should sleep, but I don't sleep. I pace around my apartment like I'm looking for something I've lost. I can't find it, so I wander some more, in and out of rooms, back and forth across the floor, like I'm gathering forensics of my own mysterious existence. I look at old photos. I zoom in on faces, look right into eyes, trace pixelated jawlines with my fingertips. I read and reread old emails and journal entries. I live the past like it's a boulder I've swallowed. I should sleep, but I don't sleep. I'm just sitting here thinking about everything I've lost. Love, time, a sense of belonging. The woman I once was, the woman I thought I would be. Now I'm a stranger in my own home, a drifter in my own life, a tourist in this city I was born in, lost and left to wander it, a sad girl in rags. I should sleep, but I don't sleep. I stand on the balcony and stare out into the night. I have so much to say and no one to say it to. So much to give, but in giving it, I've been told it's too much. Too much. Always too much, or else not enough. I should sleep, but I don't sleep. I look in the mirror for longer than I should, and I think, I'm pretty, I'm smart, I'm interesting. Why is that too much? How is that not enough? Why am I alone? This is how I get. It's all I think about. Alone, alone, alone. I am alone. It's on a loop, and it's all I can do not to be driven crazy by it. The longing for a thing that will never return. A disease I've been infected with and will have for the rest of my life. The fact that I have an actual disease that I don't think about very much is ironic, I guess. But MS doesn't hang out with me the way the longing does. It doesn't run through my veins the way the lonely does. Every day I shoot a needle into my body, an expensive drug to modify the disease I actually have, but all the while I'm just wishing there was some drug to modify the loneliness that's taken over me. No one will ever love me completely again. Maybe no one ever has. Why isn't there a drug I can take to modify that? I should sleep, but I don't sleep. Not until I've exhausted myself with self-pity. Not until I convince myself that in sleep, at least, I will not feel the way I feel right now. I should sleep, so I lie down and try finally, in this too big for one bed. Eyes staring up at the ceiling, I straddle the past and the imagined future, neither of which resembles this current reality. Eventually, it'll just happen. Sleep. It has to, I know it. I will hold hands with the lonely and drift off to the sound of my own beating heart, irregular as the rumble of trains outside my window. There you go. So that's a little bit of poetry in the middle of my book.
Thanks, Michelle. My first question is for all of you, and we'll just take turns answering it. But I always think of creative nonfiction as this melding of imagination and journalism, and then a sprinkle of glitter put on the words. And I wondered about your choice to write your stories as a memoir versus maybe doing a novel, writing something fiction that's based on personal experience. So it's really, why did you want to write this story this way? And why don't we start with you, Michelle?
It actually, you might hate my answer. I didn't set out to do it. I just did it. So I don't have a lot of I didn't think about what would I like to write or what do I want to make. It was just something that I was doing all along. I always write, and ever since I was a kid, everything I write is in short story style anyway, even though it's nonfiction. It would just be things in my life or things in my family or things I saw on the street. It's sort of like observational nonfiction or something. I don't know. So that was already the style I have. And then this just sort of started to come together until after about 10,000 words or whatever, I was like, oh, I think this is something. The editor, the editor in me was like, I actually think this is something. So
it wasn't just
it wasn't a choice. I just did it.
You just did it. Well,
I just wrote a book.
Yeah. There you go.
Sorry.
That's a magical thing to do, is just write a book. So congratulations. That's I wish that would be true for me, but yeah, I understand. You also had your podcast. You were living this life, right? So it was just natural for you as a journalist, especially, I think, to try to do that through words
But the book was first.
Oh, the book was first.
It just wasn't published.
Yeah.
It wasn't. It's only been published now. Yeah. But I adapted the book into the podcast. The podcast is an adaptation of the book.
I had that backwards. My mistake.
That's okay. No, it's
that makes sense. Okay. Thank you. I liked your answer. I didn't hate it at all. Thanks. What about you, Alison? Same question. Why this book this way?
Well, like Michelle, I didn't set out to write a book either. I just took notes because I'm always taking notes. And I actually had a very different idea for this. I was just noting how my dad was changed with this disease and with Parkinson's. Initially I was really interested. It felt like he had this new life partner, someone I didn't particularly like, who was constantly trying to get his attention and take over a bit. And so I initially had this idea of writing a piece that had this figure, because my dad's gay, and so I thought, well, I'll introduce this figure. Mr. P is his new life partner, and I had this whole idea of this, this conceit, and that I would reveal it at a certain point. But I thought I'll write a kind of 10, 20-page piece about it. But it just started with notes and observations, and then I think, like probably everyone, when we get 10 pages in or 20 pages in, and we haven't even begun yet, that's when we know, oh, this is something bigger than I expected. And then I think the story writes you. You just surrender at some point.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Rachel.
Yeah. I don't know if at first I thought I would just write like some funny stories about my funny mom and then the crazy kind of husband she got up to. So like, for example, the book opens with my mom doing ayahuasca with my mom. It was her idea.
That's a disturbing scene. I just am going to tell you, because of all the vomiting that is happening in this room, which sounds like a nightmare, but please.
It really was.
Yeah.
so, I thought it would just be fun, but then, the more I started to pull on threads, the more I realized, oh, this is actually kind of a deeper kind of investigation of, why my mom made the choices she did, and trying to just figure out kind of the puzzle of who she is and why otherwise pretty sane, rational person would choose to not get, medically treated for her cancer. So, and then in terms of my process, I don't think I could ever write a novel or a fictional book. Like, I don't actually have an imagination in that way. I'm actually like a very rural-minded person. So I actually think I took more of a journalist's approach to writing memoir. Because I think like some people, when they write memoir, even take certain liberties. But to me, that just, as a journalist, I just felt like I can't make up any dialogue. I don't even think I would know how to. So like, for example, all the dialogue in the book, I didn't make up any of my mom's words. It's all based on primary sources, like these conversations I recorded with her, diary entries, this dating guide she wrote for women over 50, this crazy play she wrote about being a cancer renegade. So it was important to me to like get the facts right and like show other people that were involved in scenes. Is that how they remembered it? Of course it's like all filtered through me, but I wanted to get the facts right.
Yeah.
I think that's super interesting. Like I did that like very similar approach. I think that like of fact checking myself quite often. I was always going back to notes, calendar dates, different things, fact checking all the time. Like I think it's just a thing that people think sometimes with narrative fiction, or even if it's non-fiction, narrative fiction, but I just made up a thing. Creative nonfiction, is that what it's called? I don't know anything about books. Like you think that, oh, you can just say whatever, it's just your memories, right? But I was very serious about everything I used and all of the dialogue. And I feel the same thing. I didn't know that, Rachel, about yours. Like the dialogue is so specific because I would write it all down like right after it happened quite often. Or I have recordings, or it's like, I know it's still, again, my side or my memory, even if you write something 10 minutes later, it could be different than the other person in the room thought or whatever, right? So It's always your filter. But anyway, I think it's good to write through a journalistic. Do you do the same thing, Alison?
No, not at all.
You're just like, whatever.
No, it's not whatever. I'm
just kidding.
No, but it's not whatever at all. I actually think of it more like sculpting, and that I never am going to get, well, I wasn't taking notes on conversations that I had with my dad. And I've always used this, what to me, the lighthouse on my shore is truth. And truth and facts are related, but they're not synonymous. As we all know, facts work in the service of truth, but there can be truth found in music and dance and nature and visual art. How is that possible? It's not factual. So what is that? That resonance of whatever that is that we touch into when we're in the presence of truth, which also I think is the resonance of love. That's what I'm interested in sculpting. And sometimes I think it doesn't, I don't have people read the things that I write before I publish them. My dad, well, he read this in galleys, but I don't ever think actually that I always give people pseudonyms, because I it's just I just think of myself as a certain kind of painter, and I'm not a journalist, but I am a painter, and but I'm a realist. I have a realistic style, and so what I always do is give people pseudonyms, because I think the characters in our books are only ever representations of the people that we are. We are sketching, and that almost never do people see themselves exactly as they, see themselves in books, exactly as they would imagine themselves appearing. And particularly in this case, my father actually he wouldn't have said to himself, oh, I'm an 80-year-old man who's, full of these tremors, with a shorn white head and slightly stooped. That's not how he sees himself at all. That's not actually, if I'd asked him if he felt that this rang true for him, he would have said no. But that is who he is. And so I felt as an artist, it's about painting the truth.
I think it's even, I write fiction, but everything that you're saying applies to fiction as well. Everyone just has a different process. I'm a journalist too, and I think I write my fiction through a journalist's eye. So it's interesting to see that the different process that everyone has, depending on what type of story they're trying to tell. This one is for you, Rachel. I'm going to start this question with you, but towards the end of the story, you ask your mom if there are any silver linings to be found. And her answer is a very clear no. And that really resonated with me because I am personally not one for silver linings, and I believe it's okay for things not to be okay. But I wondered, was she right in the end? And did you ever find a silver lining to what happened?
I know, right? It's like, please, Mom, just tell me this isn't for nothing. She's like,
no.
Just and yeah, I think she is right for the most part. I don't know, I guess, hey, I have a book. Thanks, Mom. No, just kidding. I don't know, I think the whole process of writing the book, of grieving her death, I think has made me like a better person. I like to think, I think I have greater empathy. I think I know myself more. I think I'm more in touch with my own mortality and, just how precious life really is, kind of those cliche things. I think there's benefit to that. I still would do anything to have her back instead of learning those lessons. I'd rather be less empathetic with a mother.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I've tried to embrace it as something, to learn from and to grow from, because there's not really another option.
Right. That's fair. So it's sort of a silver lining. I'm going to put that one in the box of this is a silver lining-ish.
Yeah.
It's silver lining-ish. We'll leave it at that, right? That's okay.
I wouldn't want to advertise it as like, don't worry, there's some pretty good silver linings if Derek dies. But yeah, I think with any traumatic or hard, difficult thing in our lives, I think it's always, all we can do is try to make some sort of meaning out of it and grow in some sort of positive way. And I think we're all here right now. I think it's what helps us connect to other people in a deeper way.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Thanks. Michelle, this one's for you. So as you were going through the breakup of your marriage and then the dismantling of this foundation that you expected to be there, forever, and never fall down, was there a piece of advice or a mantra that stuck with you, that something that might be helpful for someone who's going through something similar? Was there anything that kind of just stuck with you, resonated for you, and you would come back to while you were going through this? Or, if there isn't, then what advice would you give someone about that? Keep those feet going, keep that momentum going.
I think that at the beginning, when the bomb sort of hit me, I was thrust into such a deep kind of grief, and I fell down a very deep well of grief and alcohol, basically, and that went on for about 1.5 years. And in that time, I wasn't really receptive to advice. I heard it, but I couldn't internalize it. And so there were things that people told me that I remembered later, or I kind of filed away for later, knowing this is not going to be, I'm not going to feel this way forever. I know I'm going to crawl out of this well. I think I always knew that about myself, and I still lived and went to work every day and was a parent, but in the times in between, I was a hot mess, as they say.
Hot.
And but one of the really cool things that this former producer at CBC actually said to me, he ran into the hallway and was like, he said a bunch of stuff that was kind of not helpful. And then he said, and a tip would go, thank you, man, for saying all the things. He did say, like, listen, people tell you that, you know, it gets better every day, like as if it's an incremental thing that you will get better and feel better every day. And he's like, that's bullshit. It doesn't get better every day. What it does is it's like a spiral, and, you know, you feel like shit for 90, I'm swearing a lot, is that okay?
It's okay.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know, but I'm going to say it's okay.
Okay. So it's like a spiral where, you know, you feel terrible for 90% of the day, and then maybe you have like 5 minutes where you don't think about the terrible thing. And then the next, you know, over time, that those spaces between the feeling like shit and the not feeling like shit gets wider and wider. But then sometimes it increases again. And so it's not linear, basically, healing or getting over it. It's not linear. And like once I dispensed of the idea that it doesn't have to be linear and it's okay, I think that that's the thing I most say to people when they ask me the question you just asked me, is like, first of all, you also don't have to get over it. Like, I don't think that Rachel has to get ever get over her mom's death if she doesn't want to. You know, if they don't want to, they don't have to, right? And if somebody else wants to, they can. And like, you know, to have people say to me, well, it's been 2 years, or it's been 5 years, or it's been 8 years now, like, and it still bothers you, like, I don't think I need to get over it necessarily. It's linear, and it's not linear, I mean, and I can move on without, you know, this idea that I'm better. Yeah. Of course I'm better, I'm different. It's just different. It's not necessarily better. I don't know. That was.
And I do think that's helpful.
That was a spiral, that answer.
No, but it's useful to think about that, because if you expect that healing through grief or through loss or through any challenges you have is just linear, then if you're not going in, like, you have a good day and then you take 5 steps back and you have 5 really terrible days, you feel like there's something wrong with you, that you are not actually healing appropriately the way everyone else heals, right?
Yeah, like you feel like you failed. Like, oh, I've regressed. I've regressed because I'm having a bad day. It's like, you're not regressed. You're a human being. It's fine. We all have bad days and we all have good days. Like, it's okay.
I think that's a great.
Did that answer your question?
It did. I appreciate that. I think that's a great way to think about it. Okay, Alison, this one's for you. Your notebook, which we heard about in your reading about your dad, where you kept a running list of qualities of the things that you adored about him. It was one of my favorite things in your book, as a thread in the story. And I said, it's natural for writers to gravitate, I think, towards writing things down, you know, just your experiences, your thoughts, those moments that you have. But was there anything really unexpected or wonderful as an outcome that came from you doing that so specifically on this trip with your dad?
So the list was this list of crazy, it's a list of his quirks, really.
Like he giggles, the way he giggles, or the
way he giggles, the way he scurries. You know, he always used to do, which used to mortify me when he would get excited about something, you know, whether it was a meal that arrived that looked appetizing or a scene in a piece of theater, he would do this sound, woo! And that loud. I used to just, imagine as a teenager, and it just used to drive me crazy. And one of the things that I noticed is all those things that used to actually drive me bonkers were the things that I just so appreciated about him. And I found that interesting, that those qualities that at one point can just, really drive us crazy, when we see them in a different context, and when we see them as adults, maybe when we just see that person. I think what I realized, because at first I wasn't really, it was difficult to see him in that Parkinsonian state, and to see him becoming, I could see the trajectory. Parkinson's tends to only go in one direction. And so I had initially found it was just painful to see. And then at one point I realized the way to be with him is, it's not that we have to talk about it, but I actually just have to be able to witness him and just see who he is now, and see that in its own, there was one scene when we just left, we were on going to all these libraries and archives looking for these arcane bits of information that we never found. I mean, the amazing thing is that I wrote this book about something that nothing happened. We went nowhere, did nothing, found nothing. And yet what it became was, the reason I chose that title, which is a line from a Yeats poem, was because it became the series of moments with him. And what I realized that so long as I'm actually just present with him and not casting any kind of judgment on what's happening or how he is, suddenly something quite transcendent opened. And it became this moment filled with, for lack of any other word, because it is ineffable, it was a kind of grace that descended, and that took an otherwise ordinary moment and transformed it into something that was memorable. Just as all those little quirks that seemed to be nothing, they were actually who he was. And in the end, he's assembled of all of these, these crazy idiosyncrasies and quirks and bizarre habits. And that's who we are. We're this collection of imperfection. No? Beauty is actually a collection of imperfections in a sense, so long as we're present with it, so long as we're actually not expecting anything else.
Yeah. Well, I think being present was definitely a theme for you for that book, and something that we all, need to practice. I definitely need to practice being present. I find it a challenging thing to do. So whenever you have those moments where you're forced into that place, that can be helpful. Frustrating sometimes, because we always want to anticipate our futures and, just think about our past. So it's hard to be in that moment, but that was a lovely part of your book. It was all about the present, really, for that story. This question is for everyone again. Is about vulnerability, which was a theme for all of you through your stories, and whether it was about admitting truths about your relationships or accepting aging or loss or betrayals, it really played prominently through your stories. And I think it's also one of the toughest states to live in, is marinating in that vulnerability. And so you would have had to do that in writing your books, but also then later when you share those stories with the world. And so what learning really came for you, for each of you, from that willingness to be vulnerable, both with your subject matter, but also within your own life? And I'm going to start with you, Michelle. Was it?
Yeah, vulnerability. My book is extremely, it's always characterized as like raw a lot of the time. People always say like, oh, how could you have written all that? It's so brave. And it really does not feel brave. I think bravery is a thing that should be reserved for other things. To me, being vulnerable and talking about the truth of things it just feels normal. So is it hard? It wasn't hard to write. It wasn't hard to even put out there, really. I guess what was hard is like worried that people would assume it was one note, and not give it a chance. So I felt vulnerable in that sense. Like it's easy enough, and I totally get it, that people would be like, oh, it's because it says love story, in the title, but like the love story is not about me and another human being, right? It's about me. And I do think, there's this sometimes a sense that like to write a memoir is quite indulgent. It can be perceived as an indulgence, like who's going to want to read about me being sad, for 300 pages? Which is why I chose to show all the good things and bad things, the ugly sides of myself
It's not
as
just
well.
that, though, right? It's
That's
not
what I mean. It's really funny. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not, is the thing. I think if it was, that would be really boring. I don't think anybody would want to read like a whole story of despair, like an entire book of, well, maybe there's like a niche population for that. I'm not sure. Not going to disparage it, but like I wanted it to be a full picture. And so in order for it to be a full picture of like the nuances of who we are as human being and the complexity of what it is to love, to live, to be a parent, to be a child of, to be in this world, to be a partner and then not a partner, like whatever. All those things are complex. And so in order to do that, I had to be vulnerable for it to be something that people could connect with, even if they didn't go through my specific experience. Because I really didn't write a story that was only, appealing to heterosexual, jilted white ladies who are 40. Like if that was who the story was for, I think that's not the kind of thing I wanted to write.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote something that is about like all the murky junk that's underneath the water table of our lives, right? Everybody, it doesn't matter what the specific thing is. And so, plus I'm Italian and we just say everything that we feel out loud all the time. So being vulnerable is not a big deal for me.
It just is in your genes, right? It's just
yeah, maybe too much. Actually.
No, it was just the right amount.